A catastrophe in Putin's army. 90% of Russian frontline units have lost communication. The Ukrainian armed forces are delivering powerful strikes on occupied Crimea, and the SBU has destroyed half of Russia's air defense systems. Losses amount to $4 billion. Ukraine is ready to declare a ceasefire if elections are held in Russia. Zelensky puts forward a tough condition for Putin. A historic step? The Polish Sejm has made a decision that directly concerns the war in Ukraine. Russia is drowning in debt. Over the past 20 years, the aggressor's foreign debt has reached a record high. What awaits Russians? Has the Louvre been robbed again? This time it was their own guides. We'll tell you more details, don't miss it. My name is Yulia Kokan, and right now we'll talk about the main news. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on YouTube. 90% of Russian units on the front line have been left without stable communication after Musk's decision to disconnect Starlink. Experts note that although Russia will try to find alternatives, their effectiveness will now be significantly lower. This was reported by The Telegraph. Additionally, the occupiers were further hit by Roskomnadzor's restrictions on Telegram. As the same Z bloggers complain, coordination and command have completely fallen apart.
There are chats where people post targets, which are then hit by artillery or Iskanders. In the chat on Telegram, they post targets for the Iskanders. If you didn't know this, I'm telling you now how our war is being fought. This is how our war is being fought on Telegram.
At the same time, Ukraine is striking deep into Russia. The British publication notes the effective Flamingo missile strikes on an ammunition depot near Volgograd and a missile factory in the Tambov region. A particularly powerful strike hit Sudzha, where 6,000 drones were destroyed. This is one of Russia's biggest losses throughout the entire war. As we can see, what was once the world's second largest army is falling apart at the seams more and more loudly. I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a massive horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and if you can't do so directly, then support them financially. Write words of encouragement to them in the comments. I know they're watching us. Ukrainian defenders continue to deliver devastating blows to the enemy. In the temporarily occupied territories of Crimea, a BK-16 transport and landing craft was destroyed, and an RSP-10 radar station as well. In the Zaporizhzhia region, a communications hub of the Russian occupiers was hit, and in the Donetsk region, a Russian ammunition depot was struck. In the Alimansk direction in Donetsk region, Ukrainian FPV drones using fiber optics destroyed half a company of Russian occupiers. Unique footage of combat operations from the drone operators of the Signum Battalion of the 53rd Separate Mechanized Brigade. See for yourself. But that's not all. The border guards of the Steel Frontier once again achieved results in the Kursk direction, destroying a self-propelled artillery unit. They struck a D-30 gun, a generator, and 4 enemy shelters. The Alpha SBU Special Operations Center is working especially effectively. Just last year, their long-range strikes destroyed half of Russia's Panzer surface-to-air missile and artillery systems. These are key enemy air defense systems, each costing between $15 and $20 million. This also gives our forces the opportunity to break through Russian air defenses and strike their bases, depots, and airfields. The total value of all the systems destroyed in 2025 is approximately $4 billion. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of our viewers are from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such sensible viewers. Let us know in the comments below which country you're watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. And now, let's continue. The most interesting part is coming up. In Germany, the 62nd Munich Security Conference has begun, taking place from February 13th to 15th, 2026. It is attended by representatives from 120 countries, including nearly 60 heads of state and government, 56 foreign ministers, and more than 30 defense ministers, as well as leaders of over 40 international organizations. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also spoke at the conference. He was greeted with a standing ovation and applause. During his speech, the Ukrainian leader absolutely demolished the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin from the podium. According to President Zelensky, Putin does not live like ordinary people. He cannot imagine life without power or after power. Ordinary things do not interest him.
Putin is more likely to consult with Tsar Peter and Empress Catherine about territorial conquests than with anyone living today about real life. Putin may see himself as a Tsar, but in reality he is a slave to war. And if he lives another 10 years, we understand that this is possible. He will be able to regroup, recover, and expand again.
Zelensky was speaking about Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Well, speaking, he was being ironic, making jabs. Listen for yourself.
Orban might be thinking about how to grow himself a belly, and not about how to build up an army to stop Russian tanks from returning to the streets of Budapest.
Importantly, Zelensky stated that Ukraine could declare a ceasefire if elections are held in Russia. The president emphasized that Ukraine is ready for elections if necessary and allows for a ceasefire if Moscow agrees to a free expression of will.
President Trump could put pressure on Putin to ensure a ceasefire, and our parliament would amend the law and we would go to elections. If the Americans won elections in Ukraine and if the Russians won elections in Ukraine, we are open to that.
The president of Ukraine emphasized that the risks facing his country continue to change. After all, the longer the war lasts, the more resources the aggressor receives. In addition, Volodymyr Zelensky expressed disappointment with the slowness of certain decisions by international partners. According to him, Ukraine has sometimes waited months or even years for critically important aid. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte also spoke about Russia's readiness for peace. He noted that the change of negotiators on Moscow's side in the trilateral dialogue indicates a lack of real will from the Kremlin to reach a peace agreement. The NATO Secretary General emphasized that appointing Medinsky as the head of the Russian delegation does not demonstrate any serious intention from Putin to negotiate.
Well, is it really Putin? Does he take this seriously? Putin is once again sending someone to the negotiations in Geneva, that historian who talks about how everything developed since the time of the Swedes or something like that.
We will continue to follow the conference and will be the first to tell you about all the most important developments. Don't miss it. The Polish Sejm has voted for a law granting amnesty to its citizens who fought on the side of Ukraine. And here is an important nuance. According to Polish law, their citizens are prohibited from participating in a war on the side of another state. This is punishable by up to 5 years in prison. But now the neighbors have made an exception. And Poles who fought specifically for Ukraine will be exempt from criminal liability. Moreover, the amnesty even applies to those who have already been convicted. The law covers the entire period since April 6, 2014. Essentially from the beginning of Russian aggression against Ukraine. In other words, Poland has recognized at the legislative level that its citizens' participation in the defense of Ukraine is not a crime. So, what is this NATO reboot? The US Deputy Defense Secretary called for the creation of NATO 3.0, where Europeans would pay more for their own defense. Riot called his speech remarkable. Details in the report.
The US Deputy Secretary of War called for the creation of NATO 3.0, where Europeans would take responsibility for their own defense.
I think that in 2025 there was a rethinking and a genuine, true commitment emerged. Thanks to President Trump's leadership, Europe will take the lead in NATO's defense, which in some ways is a return to the past. At the same time, NATO is becoming a kind of version 3.0 based on partnership rather than dependence and returning to what it was really created for.
Colby is considered an advocate of an isolationist US foreign policy and a hardliner toward Europe. But at the same time, the NATO Secretary General called the speech remarkable.
I'm very glad that Secretary Annan is present here today. Elbridge Colby. For many years, he has consistently advocated for Europe and Canada to truly step up when it comes to defense spending and defense industrial production. And the good news is that billions are coming in. I mentioned yesterday that, for example, Germany will spend twice as much in 2029 as it did in 2021.
According to experts, the increase in defense spending by Europeans is not only a guarantee of victory in a possible war, but also a good plan to prevent it.
When Washington talks about the need for European countries to increase military spending, it's not just some conditional demand from President Donald Trump and his allies, but a necessity for the European army to rearm at the same pace as the rearmament of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Because only such rearmament, by the way, as we know from the Ukrainian experience, can deter Russia from invading. But the lack of effective military programs only emboldens the Russian Federation and allows it to count on.
Moreover, according to Rutte, we need to prepare not only for war with Russia, but also with China.
We should not be naive about China. When it comes to the Arctic, it concerns not only Russia but also China. We know that sea routes are opening up, so we must protect the Arctic.
The Russians, of course, constantly deny such predictions, but at the same time, they keep making threats.
In Ukraine, we are conducting a special military operation. We have no intention towards any Europe. We are not planning to attack. We have absolutely no need for that. And if Europe suddenly prepares its threats, gets ready for war against us, carries them out, and starts attacking the Russian Federation, the President has said that this will not be a special military operation on our part. It will be a full-scale military response by all means available to us, using all the means at our disposal in accordance with the doctrinal documents on this matter.
But intelligence data tells a different story. A few months ago, Danish intelligence published a shocking report about Putin's future plans.
Within the first 6 months following the complete cessation of active military hostilities on the Russian-Ukrainian front, the armed forces of the Russian Federation will once again possess the full capability to wage a localized armed conflict in one of the border countries. Within a period of approximately 2 years, Russia will present a very significant and credible threat to either a single nation or potentially several different NATO countries all at once. And thus it will be ready for a regional war against several countries in the Baltic Sea region at the same time. And finally, over the next 5 years, NATO must be prepared for a large-scale war on the European continent in which the United States.
The fact that Europeans have finally woken up and started to adequately perceive external threats is certainly encouraging. All that remains is to wait and see whether Russia will decide to carry out its plans.
The US will allocate $13 billion to Armenia to reduce its dependence on Russia. Azerbaijan has signed a charter on strategic partnership with the United States. Kazakhstan is blocking Russians from laundering money and circumventing sanctions. In addition, Russia is losing one of its main buyers of weapons and Asian allies, Vietnam, about how Russia's former allies are moving further and further away from the Kremlin. More on this in the following segment. The United States is strengthening its strategic partnership with Azerbaijan and Armenia, while Russia appears to be losing the battle for influence in the Caucasus region.
The agreement with Armenia and the visit of the Hungarian leader to neighboring Azerbaijan the next day highlighted the intensifying geopolitical struggle for influence in the Caucasus region, a vital trade and energy corridor connecting China with Europe through Central Asia, which for decades has been under Moscow's close watch.
As is known, Azerbaijan and the United States have signed a strategic partnership charter, while Armenia has signed an agreement with the US on cooperation in the nuclear field.
Turkey, which has a defense pact with Azerbaijan, is taking steps to open its border with Armenia, which has been closed since 1993, and to establish diplomatic relations for the first time since the collapse of the Soviet Union. The European Union is also strengthening its ties with Armenia, which has announced plans to seek EU membership in the future, despite currently being part of a customs bloc led by Russia.
Well, what can I say? Even all the former Soviet republics, we used to live as one family of nations.
Russia is also relentlessly losing its influence in Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan is blocking Russians from laundering money and circumventing sanctions. CPD?
In fact, Kazakhstan's president Kassym-Jomart Tokayev stated that about $14 billion were laundered from a neighboring country through one of Kazakhstan's banks. And although Tokayev did not directly name Russia, the Kremlin clearly understood which country the head of Kazakhstan was referring to. Russia is also losing one of its main weapons buyers and allies in Asia.
Vietnam is one of the largest and traditional buyers of Russian weapons in Asia, but now it is increasingly turning to Western manufacturers. A key sign of this shift was the negotiations with France on the supply of Rafale fighter jets.
There is growing disappointment with the actions of Russia and China, but support for the Kremlin continues there, in particular because the weakening of Russia by the war is very beneficial for Beijing.
Therefore, to say that China, regardless of all the documents, is a true strategic ally, well, most likely that's not the case. Because China is, in fact, interested in weakening the Russian Federation. The longer the Russian Federation wages war, the more resources it spends, the more dependent it becomes on China, on its products, on Chinese technology. This applies to both the civilian and military sectors. Russia is becoming dependent on Chinese loans. Russia is becoming dependent on China's purchase of Russian oil, and this is beneficial for China.
Russia's former allies, as they say, are slowly but surely distancing themselves from the Kremlin. And while this distancing may not be very noticeable in the Kremlin today, in the near future, Russia may find itself alone with its imperial ambitions.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Belgorod continues to fade into darkness. Another thermal power plant in the city is being written off after a missile strike. Locals report power outages in the city. There are disruptions in water supply and heating. Well, those who wanted to freeze Ukraine are now warming themselves at heating stations. The mirror of war works flawlessly. Russia is up to its ears in debt. Over the past 20 years, the foreign debt of the aggressor country has grown to a record high for the last 2 decades. Due to sanctions and economic problems, Russian companies are operating at a loss. Our journalists will tell you whether there is a way out of this situation and under what conditions.
Russia owes almost $62 billion to foreign creditors, which is a record for the past 20 years. Russia's external debt includes the government's obligations to non-residents in foreign currency, which is part of the country's total external debt. This also includes debts owed by state and private banks, as well as various organizations.
Western creditors have left. Starting from the very first day of January in the year 2026, which marks a significant milestone for our upcoming schedule, we will begin implementing these new protocols across all departments to ensure full compliance with the updated regulatory standards that are set to take effect at that specific point in time.
The Bank of Russia estimated the country's external debt at $319.8 billion. In just 1 year, it increased by $30 billion, or 10.4%. To be continued.
Additionally, the international export markets for various Russian products are steadily shrinking across the globe. China is buying less and less coal and has almost stopped buying steel altogether. As many of you are likely already aware, there is a significant shift happening with global oil prices right now. In fact, the market price of Russian crude oil has practically dropped by half of its former value.
Due to sanctions and a collapsing economy, Russian companies have suffered a record loss of 7.5 trillion rubles, the highest in history. Since 2023, this figure has almost doubled.
The cost of servicing loans in Russia is very high, and the interest they pay is written off as part of production costs. As a result, production costs rise sharply. Furthermore, it is important to note that the international marketplaces for Russian products are steadily shrinking in size.
According to Rostat data, the metallurgical and oil refining industries are suffering the most. Wholesale trade and mineral extraction are also affected. Developers, as well as companies in transport engineering and light industry, are also experiencing difficulties.
Different factors affect different industries. Some depend on the domestic market. For example, if we look at developers, apartments, they build them, but no one is buying. Accordingly, there is a crisis among developers and builders, and there is no end in sight. The largest company that used to build housing has practically asked the government to cover its losses. But most likely, the answer will be negative. And this is the first candidate for bankruptcy, a major bankruptcy.
A decline in investment and a flight of depositors from banks. Such a fate for his country was predicted by the deputy head of the State Duma Committee on Economic Policy, Nikolai Arefyev. Arefyev also stated that the central bank and the government are colluding to hide the real inflation rate. At the same time, the budget is currently short by 5 trillion rubles.
First of all, congratulations on that. And
A bit of cringe from across the border. This time in Yakutsk, footage appeared online showing local residents standing out here in the freezing cold, in line to collect water from, attention, the only faucet. Yes, you heard that right. Yakutia has diamonds, gold, and half the periodic table. Mendelev's table. But people there live in the real Middle Ages because all the money is being siphoned off for the war against Ukraine, which has done nothing wrong to the people of Yakutia.
So I came to the water pump. Here it is, this pump. The only one left in Morpha. All the others have been cut off. What can you do? People need water. You can't do without water. That's it. The water pressure is very, very weak. A big crowd of cars has gathered. How are we supposed to understand this? In the residential area, in the private sector, it's all private sector. All the houses are private. There they are. All the houses are private, all without water. They can't manage without it. There's only one water pump for the entire neighborhood. And there are always lines here because of the water.
Well, honestly, it's nothing surprising. That's the great and mighty Russia for you. Only in words. Adam Kadyrov had his spleen removed, and he might lose sight in one eye. But the father of the main Chechen rich kid involved in the accident denies the accident even happened. And he posts a video of his healthy but suddenly much thinner son. The opposition started talking about Adam having a double. So where is the truth in this story? Let's watch. Kadyrov has resurrected Adam. But there's a catch.
Oh, wow, look at that. The newly resurrected Adam.
We're only talking about Kadyrov's third son. The chubby one with medals, a fan of weapons and racing around, just like his dad. On January 16th, it seemed like karma had caught up with him. The motorcade of 18-year-old Adam and his entourage got into a car accident. Patrols immediately blocked off the road. That day, an airborne hospital from the Ministry of Emergency Situations flew twice between Grozny and Moscow. According to the media, Adam Kadyrov was so seriously injured that his father, not trusting Chechen doctors, decided to save his life at the Botkin hospital. Ukrainians, overjoyed, did what is forbidden in Russia. They made dozens of memes with dark jokes, like, "Good luck, here's Ramzan's chance for a new kidney."
For the heroic acceptance of a concrete pillar, Adam Kadyrov is awarded an honorary medal.
Congratulations, brother.
Served for the good of the Republic.
For almost a month, there was no information about the health of the Chechen leader's son. Not a word, although various videos were posted on Adam's page on Instagram, which is banned in Russia. But it quickly became clear in all those videos, the Grozny bluff, because all the videos had been recorded long before the day of the accident. And so, almost a month later, Don broke his silence. On his social media, Ramzan posted a work meeting with the Chechen prosecutor Arsen Adayev.
Consistent work continues to ensure the rule of law, public safety, and socio-economic stability. With
shaking hands, stumbling as he read from a piece of paper, the chief prosecutor reported on the situation in the Republic. Well, and at the end of this performance, in fact, the very thing happened for which this whole meeting was arranged. Kadyrov's accident did not appear. For those who didn't understand anything from Don's rambling, let me explain. Kadyrov Sr. was outraged that there are a huge number of accidents in Chechnya, but only the traffic accident involving Adam made it to the top, even though the whole situation is a setup. And as supposed proof of the fake, Ramzan published a video with his assistant and, in fact, Adam. This video is most likely genuine.
Adam Kadyrov has been discharged from the Botkin hospital. Near the 9th building, where Adam was staying, there is no DPS car, nor are there numerous foreign cars with security. You can easily approach the building. Apparently, Ramzan, Kadyrov decided to continue his son's treatment in Chechnya in order to show Adam himself to the public. The video with Adam. Apparently, it is genuine. At the very least, the cheese curds on the table were produced. On January 26th, 2026.
But there are quite a few questions about the video itself. The video is of very poor quality, and experts at CHKO GPU noticed traces of professional makeup. on Adam, who, by the way, wore a head covering throughout the entire video and didn't eat anything. Moreover, in this video, there was no trace left of the former chubby boy. Many suspected that the person in these shots was actually a double.
At the Botkin clinic, according to our information, Adam Kadyrov had his spleen removed and was prescribed a strict diet for 6 months, excluding fatty meats, spicy and salty foods. Kadyrov's son was also diagnosed with a fracture as a result of a head injury in his jaw, which by itself ruled out eating solid food for a while. After 3 weeks on the diet, 18-year-old Adam Kadyrov lost excess weight and shed his childhood chubbiness.
Sources report that, most likely, the speed enthusiast paid the price with his eyesight. He has nerve damage, which means Adam could go blind in at least one eye. But Kadyrov's bodyguards, who were with him in the main car of the motorcade, were less fortunate. They have not appeared in public since. Louvre was robbed again. Yes, I'm serious, only this time it was their own guides. At the beginning of this week, Paris police uncovered a large-scale fraud ring. They were selling fake tickets to the Louvre and the Palace of Versailles. The damage to the Louvre alone is estimated at more than 10 million euros. About 10 people have been arrested, including museum employees and tour guides. This was reported by Le Parisien. The police carried out a series of arrests in connection with a major scam involving the sale of fake tickets and illegal overbooking of tours. With a guide, what did it bring? It caused significant damage to the Louvre Museum and the Palace of Versailles. The investigation began after a complaint was filed by the Louvre in December 2024. In it, the museum informed the authorities about the systematic presence of several Chinese guides in the museum who were fraudulently leading groups of Chinese tourists. At the same time, the same tickets were used repeatedly for different people. Surveillance and wiretapping quickly confirmed the museum's suspicions. The tickets were reused several times, and tourist groups were artificially split up to avoid paying for guide services at their own expense. Wiretapping also helped identify an accomplice inside the Louvre, whom the tour guides paid in cash in exchange for not conducting inspections. That's all for now. Please like this video and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Ukraine Today, so you don't miss our next episodes. See you next time.